looking at the Janome Sewist 709 and the Sewist 721 and looking at the different stitches and feet included in with your machines. Today I'm working on the Sewist 709 and it is very similar to the Sewist 721. The 721 has a couple extra stitches, but what we're talking about today are the basic functions of the machine. To start off, we'll look over here at the dial and we have stitches A through H, and then we have a couple extra stitches on the side that look a little bit different. These three selections are for a buttonhole. So let's zoom in to our stitch guide. So we have two straight stitches. We have A and B. The A stitch is up through the center of the stitch plate, where the B is off to the left hand side. Having two different locations for a straight stitch is good for when you're trying to landmark off of the presser foot or off the guidelines on your stitch plate. A and B are straight stitches, and this will be used for a variety of projects. C and D are various zigzag stitches, and these are great for stretch projects. Anything with stretch in the fabric, you need to use a zigzag stitch so that your stitches don't pop. E and F are both blind hem or overcast, E and F are both blind hem type stitches, and G and H are both overcast type stitches. So today we're going to look at the A, B, C, and D, and then the E stitch. There are examples in your manual for the G and H, but these first five are the ones we're going to focus on today. So let's look first at our A stitch. So I have our machine set up today with a purple thread on top, just so we can see the stitches a little bit clearer. So we're going to start first with this A stitch. You'll notice that, sorry, I keep hitting my camera there. You'll notice that with this stitch, that the needle is going into the middle of the foot. So let's start with that. I like to start with my foot, or with my needle down. I put my foot down, my presser foot down, and then I'm going to start to stitch. And that gives us a nice straight stitch, and I'll show you the results of that in just a second. But if you look at the B stitch, I'm going to switch to the B, and you'll notice, did you see that? The needle jumps over to the left. So now it's just going to stitch just like the A stitch, but off center. Next, I will show you all the stitches in a second, but I want to go through them so that you can see them all together. So now I'm going to select a stretch stitch, but let's go over here just quickly. And you'll notice that in our, from the B, there's this line system, and this just indicates how wide of a stretch stitch or zigzag stitch you're going to have. So it goes from narrow all the way to the largest being at C. So I'm going to show you a small one, a medium, and a large. Okay, starting out with a small zigzag, and then a medium. I just turn the dial a few notches, and then finally our large zigzag. And then I'm going to remove that to show you what it looks like. So first up, we have our A stitch, and it's going along here. And then, let me zoom out a little bit for you. So we have the A stitch, it's off to the right, so it would have been stitching like this. And then it moved into our B stitch, which was off to the left. So I didn't change the fabric at all, but I was able to change the location of the stitch. And then we have a small zigzag, a medium zigzag, and a large zigzag. So those are our A, B, and C stitches. Next up, let's look at one of the presser feet that was included. This one, it's a little bit of a funny looking one, is our zipper foot. So what this allows us to do is allows this edge to ride along the teeth of a zipper, and the needle will be stitching in this hole. So it makes sure that we aren't going to sew on top of the zipper. I have already attached it to one side, and we'll attach the second side together. So in here you will see that I was stitched fairly close to the line. On this one, the zipper foot rode along there, and you can see exactly where that needle stitched along that line. And that kept me from breaking my needle and kept this sewn as close as possible, because when you flip it over and we pull that fabric back, it leaves a nice exposed little bit of an edge on the zipper tape, but nothing too big. And this is how you get really nice professional looking zippers. I know zippers are a little intimidating for people, and I even know some seasoned stitchers that have quilted and sewn things for decades that refuse to touch a zipper because they're so afraid of it. I'm here to tell you it's not scary, and it's quite easy, especially when you have a great zipper foot like on the Janome Sewist 709 and 721. So to do this, I take a piece of fabric, and I'm going to take my zipper with the first pouch, or sorry, we are kind of making a pouch, the first side attached, and I'm just going to line up the fabric and the zipper tape. So I have the edge and this edge lined up, and I've lined up the top of the zipper tape to there, and I'm going to just give it a couple of pins. You can give it more pins if you feel more comfortable with having a lot of pins. I've sewn a lot of zippers in my time, so 1 or 2 is good for me. And next up, so I have that pinned on, and next I'm going to change out my A foot for my E foot. But before we do that, we're going to look at where we're going to be sewing. So we want to sew along here, and there's 2 positions you can have your foot on. You'll see that there's a hole here and a hole here. So if we attach the foot here, we're going to sew along this edge. If we attach the foot here, we're going to sew along this edge. So I'm going to attach it here so that we can sew this way along our pouch. Okay, so to change our feet, there's a button on the back of your foot to pop off the old one and put on the new one. And now we're going to make sure that our stitch selector is at A. And that's going to put it, look, when I hand dial that forward, it's going to put it right in that sweet spot. So now I'm going to put my fabric under, and I like to start my zippers pretty close to where the zipper is going to actually be, so that I know I have it in the right position. I have the foot down, and then I'm going to stitch in, put my needle down just to get it started, and then I'm going to start to sew. Oh, and you see I got it a little stuck there on that first zipper at the end. But for the most part, it's smooth sailing along there, because this side part is a little bit higher and lets the zipper pass under it. And I'm not going to sew over the pins because it poses a safety hazard. One, if you hit it and it breaks, you could break your needle and those things go flying, or you can damage your machine. So I'm going to make sure to pull that pin out before we get there. And then we're going to do the same at the next pin. And one thing that we need to watch out for is our zipper pull. So if I try to sew around it, it's going to kind of bump out. So what I want to do is I put the needle in, I'm going to raise my presser foot, and then I'm going to try to sneak the zipper pull past here. And that's a little bit tricky sometimes. I fiddle with it. And then I've got it. And then I'm going to sew, continue on sewing till the end. Put my thing back down. And I'm going to reverse it just a little bit to secure it. And then take it out. We have a nice close zipper. Look how close that is to the teeth. And at no point was I in danger of sewing over the zipper. And then I'm going to close it all the way and flip it over so that you can see what we did on this side. And now we have a really nice, evenly installed zipper. And the next steps, you can top stitch this down and then sew around the other 3 sides, and then you have a completed little zipper pouch. Zipper pouches are a great little project to start out with, and you can find tons of tutorials and different patterns for them online. I know our Janome Life.wordpress.com has some zipper pouches on there for you to check out, and different ways to install zippers. But that is a super quick and easy zipper using your zipper foot. You don't need to be afraid of it. Next up, we have this G foot. This foot is, it is a blind hem foot. So it's kind of interesting. It has this little dial, and this dial changes where this little plastic bit is, and that plastic bit is a guide, so we can run our fabric up to the edge of that, and it keeps our everything nice and even and stitching happily at the right point. So this is used for blind hems. We're going to look at some blind hems, and then we're also going to look at pin tucking, which is a really cool thing that is popping up more in the design world. Now that we've looked at our blind hem foot, we're going to attach it to our machine. I'm going to remove the zipper foot that we are using, and then using the button on the back, I'm going to snap this one back in, or put this one in, and there's this cool little slot. I'm not sure if you can see it there. That just lets you feed the thread through without having to put it through the hole. It's ingenious, makes things so easy. Okay, so we're going to make a blind hem. And here is an example I made of a blind hem. Do you see these teeny tiny dots? That is the stitches that we make when we make the blind hem. It's hard to see because I used white on white for here so we could see what you're trying to achieve. And then these stitches up here, those are our blind hem stitches, and there's just one little one that goes into the fold of the fabric. And when you open it up, you barely see it at all. So that is what we're trying to achieve. So I wanted to show you with fabric that you can see what's going on. And so here is, oh, I have to flip it. This is what we're trying to achieve. So it's these stitches along the edge of the fabric. They don't have to be that tight to the edge of the fabric. I just happen to be that close. And then these stitches, let's call them the peaks, go right into the very edge of the fabric, of the fold of the fabric. So when you open it, you get these very faint dots. And I used a contrasting thread so that we could see it here. So how to set this up is we have our fabric, and this is the front of the fabric for this part of it. And I taken it and folded once to the back to make a hem, a single fold hem. But now we need to fold it back to the front to create a little ledge on the back of the fabric that we can stitch on. Does that make sense? I have the fabric, I fold it once to the back so that it's a hem, but then I, a little bit down, fold it back to create this little lip. And this is the edge here that we're going to sew into this little fold here that we're going to put barely on the inside of it. And this is the edge that our stitches are going to go along. So to set this up, we have our machine all set up. I just have lost my needle thread. It's some reason, oh, there we go. So I'm going to put this back through. I'm going to zoom us in a bit. Okay. So I'm going to select our stitch. We're going to go to the E stitch. And when we use the E stitch, it's patterned because it's a zigzag. There's going to be a bunch of stitches over on the right hand and center of the needle plate. And then there's going to be a stitch way over to the left. So we're going to look for that left stitch to set this up. So I'm going to just use my hand wheel, moving it forward, cranking through the series of stitches, and then look, my needle is now over on the left, and we're going to use that to set up our stitch. So we're going to put our fabric under, and we're going to put our needle in right on the very edge of the fabric where we want that stitch to go. Remember, we want it barely on the inside of that fold, like barely, just a wee bit. And then we're going to take our dial and move it in. So if we put our foot down, that it's going to snug up right against this fold here. And that's what we're going to watch and pay attention to as we're going down, is that that is going to stay right there. It's one of those things that you have to go slow and pay a lot of attention to, and you can adjust as you go. So now I'm going to start sewing. And I can look at the back and we're doing okay. So we're going to keep going. And it's going to make a huge difference when you use thread that matches. There's a little bit more playroom when you use a thread that matches. This is just so you can actually see what's going on. And then we've cut that. And so you can see in here that these stitches have barely caught the edge of that fabric. And now what we do is we're going to flip this up to the other side and have a little look on the other side. And then look at these ones. These ones here, teeny tiny dots. So that's what you're looking for when you do use your blind hem foot. Matching thread, you're going to have this gloriousness. Okay, so also what we can do with this foot are pin tucks. And pin tucks are basically, you use it to sew along the edge of the fabric, and you create these little details that kind of stick up. Here, let's zoom out a bit. So they stick up and add interest. You'll see these on a lot of shirts and blouses, decorative pillows. I've seen it in quilts. It's just like a little simple way to add interest to a project. So this is made using the blind hem foot. And then another thing that you can do with them is, I've seen this happening a lot in the quilting world, where you have your pin tucks and then you kind of sew them down to create these really interesting texture components to a piece. So this is a simple procedure, a simple way of doing things, and it can have such great results. To set up our machine for our pin tuck, we are going to select our A stitch, which is going to move our needle around a little bit. And then we're going to take our fabric. I've done a couple of my pin tucks already. They're fun and easy to do. So all you do is, if you want them evenly spaced, measure them out and then give it a fold and a quick press to get a nice crisp edge. And what we're going to do is just put in the needle, that's maybe 1 millimeter inside the folded edge. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to try to get you in a little bit closer. So I'm going to start to put, using my hand crank, moving the needle forward to move my needle down, is I'm going to find where I want it on my pin tuck to go in. And then, so I've the needle set where I want it, but I need to adjust this guide and bring it out. We were in closer for the blind hem, and now we're going to go out a little bit for this one. And so when I think I have it right, just put the foot down. That's pretty good. And now you can just sew all the way through. Making sure to keep it nice and close to that edge. And when you're done, finished, so then it's sewed just like that along the edge. And then you can, once you have all the pin tucks done that you want, you can fold them one way or the other, or whatever you want to do with them. I've used 2 different colors of thread on here, white on the back, and you can see the little pin pricks of the blue on the back from the front. But if I'd used white thread on both sides, you wouldn't see that at all. So it's up to you. Sometimes you'll want a pin tuck with with thread matching. And sometimes it's cool to have something a little bit interesting like this, especially if you were waving them. It'd be cool to see like the dark and then the light. The sky is the limits. It's a really easy technique that can have really stunning results. So that was a brief overview of the feet included, except for the button foot and the buttonholer. There's a separate video on how to use those because it saves so much time being able to use your machine to install a buttonhole and to install a button. I hope that you've enjoyed this video and that you've learned something new. Have a great day.